Hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. It is great to be with you. Episode 300 and something, wherever it is. Who knows? It could be 320, 315. We're counting, but yeah, I'm rubbish at doing this. It's great to be with you, talking about the future of education, having conversations with people from all around the world, thinking and rethinking what could our education system look like. So yeah, we're excited for another conversation with somebody else from another part of the world who's going to help us unpack these conversations and questions about how education can be shifted. Steve, it's good to see you first. Always good to see you, my friend. Before we introduce our guest, I know that we are in the throes of lots of exciting stuff, aren't we? So as Edufuturists and announcements,
the Edufuturist agenda is full, and is only going to get fuller. It's going to be like as exciting as the Christmas advert from Coca-Cola when that lands for the first time.
It has done already. I've seen it.
What? No way.
Get out of town.
Get out of town. Absolutely not. Like, you know, I mean, it's getting earlier in shops, but 14th of October, even still, Coca-Cola must be really splashing out.
Steve, we're not recording on the 14th of October. Why are you saying the 14th? You've just made a number up. Like, what's going on here?
How ridiculous. I can't believe we're on the 7th of December and I went back to the 14th of October. So, but ultimately, even if it is, I cannot believe that we're talking about it on the 8th of August, Ben. It's just too soon, mate. It's just too soon.
In January, it's really, really early for Christmas. Anyway.
Yeah, Coca-Cola are really spending their budget heavily this year already.
Early.
Yeah.
For those people who have absolutely no idea what's going on, including probably our guest who's in the studio, we rarely give away when we're recording because we could be recording at any point and we're scheduled out for weeks and weeks and weeks. So, it's that Schrodinger's cat thing that anybody who knows us, we're going on about again. Me and Steve just have these private jokes that most people don't understand, but it's okay. We have fun. Most people are probably skipping through this. Maybe that's why people don't listen all the way to the end of the podcast, because we just talk. No, I'm just joking. They listen, and it's great to have so many listeners from all around the world. Well, we are joined in the studio by a guest, so we will stop rambling about nonsense and get to what we are supposed to be talking about today. And we're joined by I'm going to let him introduce himself. Tell us a little bit about you and how you got to where you are.
So I'm Matt Dalio. First, thank you for having me. And I'll kind of talk about what we do very quickly, and then really how we got there. What we do, we're focused on how you educate. There are 3 billion kids under the age of 25, and they need to be educated. And when I say we need to educate them, I mean, like, as humanity, we need to educate 3 billion people in skills that are really, really different than the skills that obviously that schools have been poised for, because the workforce has changed. And so what we do is, just to oversimplify, is we teach kids to build video games. And that simple little insight is actually so powerful. And the way that we discovered it is that we have another team that's also focused on device access and internet access in emerging markets. We have a desktop operating system focused on emerging markets, and we have done that for about 15 years. And in the process of doing that, we realized that as we were looking in those communities at how you would teach kids in places where there were no teachers to teach. I mean, you'd go to these classrooms and 90% of the math teachers in the classrooms, for example, in Guatemala, would fail the math exam that they're supposed to teach to. And we're asking ourselves, well, then how do we teach kids to be part of this, super, fantastic digital economy where all these incredibly high paid jobs are? How would you begin to even conceive of teaching those kids? Well, we stumbled onto this strange little fact, which is that almost all of our engineers had learned to code as kids by hacking their video games. They were all kids. They loved games. They discovered they could hack their games or build games, and it was more fun to hack them than to play them. It was more fun to build them than to play them. And then I discovered that Elon Musk learned that way, and Mark Zuckerberg learned that way. And most engineers I speak to these days are like, "Yep, that's how I learned." Just yesterday, I was speaking to another one of those. Actually, just before this, a super senior product manager that we're interviewing was like, "Yep, that was my path." And so we started asking ourselves the question: like, if this is the way that everyone learns, then why aren't we teaching this way? And so that's the thing that led us to realize, well, we can teach this way. We could teach kids to build games. And if you teach a young person, whether that's a high school student, a college student, middle school student, how to build a game using real professional software, tools like Unity and GitHub and Blender, then next thing you know, they're actually building real professional software. And they then know how to build real professional software, even if they then take that into all of the abundance of industries that live beyond the game industry. So that's a quick summary of what we do and why.
So you kind of touched upon it a little bit, but I suppose we'll dive straight into the AI conversation. Everybody says that every single job that's ever existed will be taken using AI. So why teach them these skills then, if ultimately AI is going to build video games on our behalf anyway?
Yeah, it's
I
a
don't believe,
great
just to call it out, I don't believe that's going to happen. But it's just that provocation of people say, well, why then?
it's a great question. It's the question. I'm very, very slowly chipping away at writing a book. And the hardest chapter that I've had to write in that book is what will humans do? Everyone who has some insight into what humans might be able to one day do for a career, I ask the question, and I have not found a good answer. And so anything that I say is going to be, a groping at an answer, but not an answer, because there is no answer. But what I will say is that there's an entire class of jobs that is currently in the process of being wiped out by AI. Just today, someone was showing me the new startup they have, and it's basically, anyway, I probably shouldn't talk about it because he gave it to me in confidence, but it's an entire class of jobs that can be wiped out, and that's happening systematically by vertical. And so the question is, well, in that world, what do you do? And then we also live in a world where Mark Zuckerberg is offering $100 million signing bonuses to these like Uber AI engineers. And so there's this dichotomy between those who have the skills of creation. I'll use the word creation because it's not just about code, and we could talk about code specifically, but it's about the ability to create. I call them Silicon Valley skills, right? The startup skills that power all of these amazing powerhouses, where all of this economic value and power is being accreted. Like, what are the skills that those people who have those jobs have? Because those are the skills we need to train people for. Because if they have those skills, they will either get those jobs or they'll start their own new things and create new jobs that hire in more people with those jobs. And so, from our perspective, the skills you have to teach are the skills that are like on the ever-moving frontier of what the tools of this modern world, mostly infused with AI, look like. And I could talk about kind of the 5 layers of skills that we've identified. I'll just kind of list them out quickly because it's a more concrete answer to the question, which is when people think AI, let's learn AI, they think like prompt engineering. That's yes, you need it, and prompt engineering is incredible, very, very powerful. And it's also a little like saying, well, back in the days of web, let's teach people to Google well and they'll have jobs. Like, yes, you need it, but there are skills beneath it. The skill at kind of level 2 is all of these incredible tools that you can use. So, for example, you can string together multiple agents into entire like workflows, chains of agents that speak to each other and pass work product back and forth between each other. It's like a marketer. Today you hire a marketer and you hire a team of marketers, and each one does their little slice. Today you hire, a person who can orchestrate a team of agents. And so one is doing this analysis of the potential target markets. The next agent is doing, what are the potential ads that you could target them with? Another one's doing images layered on top of it. Another one's pumping that into Facebook. Another one's doing data analytics in the back end and then using that to inform the front end. Like that, the person who knows how to do that, that's the marketer you want to hire. And so from our perspective, I want to teach young people those skills because those are the skills that are going to be the most employable skills of tomorrow from our perspective.
Okay, so this is exciting. So what we're talking about is we want to prepare young people for a future. So that's really floating all of our boat. We're all in the space of realizing that the school model is not necessarily the teachers. We're not talking about teachers. We're not talking about educational leaders per se. We're talking about a system that is, and we say this often in our newsletters, in our podcast, all the stuff. So the system is absolutely perfectly designed for a system, for a world that existed. We just don't need it anymore. So it's perfectly engineered to create factory ready, compliant young people where jobs are for life, and you go and you follow the family trade, or you don't leave your bubble, and ultimately that world doesn't exist. And therefore the redesigning of a system and the redesigning of skills development, the redesigning of knowledge learning and what education looks like is going to look really different. Where you said you were working through a book, many of our listeners will know that me and Steve are writing our first book together, and currently in the throes of that. we've got quite a tight deadline that we've got to work to. We created the deadline, but we've I say we. Steve's pulling his face because he's done. I know what's happened here is that Ben's done what Ben does and sets a deadline that, okay, let's see what we can do, and then goes, okay, let's all work to that, and then goes, oh crap, that's a really hard deadline to work to anyway. But we're writing a book, and the book that we're writing about is about pick and mix education, because what we are saying is that the system that is everybody goes to the same school for life, they stay at that one, everything they're supposed to learn should come from that school, is disappearing. And interestingly, what you're talking about here in terms of the skills that we're developing, it's not just about the world of work, it's about that ability to thrive in life. So yes, it's the hacking, and interestingly, in the UK, it might be different where you are. It might be different where other people are listening to this. In the UK, we had a huge structural curriculum reform in computing. It used to be called ICT, and we had a curriculum reform, and now it's called computer science, and we're going to focus on coding. And nobody looked down the road that said, and thought, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to teach every kid to code. And you're saying now that the conversation here isn't about teaching kids how to code. It's about teaching them how to code and develop the skills that by doing the thing that so it's that it's not necessarily teaching coding. Like, here is Python. This is the syntax. It's not that. It's like hacking, and it's working into that adaptability and agility, because there's all sorts of things that develop in there. Have I got that right in terms of how that prepares?
If you take a startup of let's call it 10 people for simple math, 100 people, about 20% of them will be engineers. And then you have the product designers and the project managers and the marketers and the digital artists. You've got a whole suite of a team that has to work in an orchestrated fashion to deliver a product. And that's what the working world is. Engineering, computer science is an incredibly important discipline. I continue to believe that it specifically because we live in a world where AI makes code way more powerful. So when you know how to use a tool like Cursor, an AI, platform, basically where you put a little bit of code in and it unlocks, all sorts of amazing code. Like the dance of you knowing how to operate a tool like that and knowing how to read its native language that it comes back. And so, it's almost code and English merge in some way. Incredibly, incredibly powerful, more powerful now than ever in history. And then also you could pull the APIs. So you can pull, these big, large language models, you pull them in, huge, huge value. And it's one of those 5 disciplines. You also need product managers and project managers and the 3D modeler who's going to be the next architect or industrial designer, or, you need a team.
Yeah, and I think, are you still there, Matt?
Yes, sorry, I cut
No,
out
that's
quickly.
okay. No, I think it's really interesting, isn't it? It's like I did some work with a previous employer with the RAF cadets, and they were developing. So the RAF cadets, so young people or trainees that were in to train for the RAF, the Royal Air Force in the UK, were going through potentially qualifications that we're developing in space. Not in space, we weren't sending them to space to do the learning. Just to clarify that, everybody, what we were doing is we were they were creating these qualifications to learn around space. And everybody said, why would that be a BTEC? All the people that are going to be in NASA and all of these high-end jobs, they're going to be people that have done A-levels and degrees. Well, my question would be why? And also, what's really interesting, and it was a lady called Jill Matterface, that we know well on that podcast, or Dr. Jill Matterface. And she then said, well, what about all of the roles? Your understanding of anybody who thinks a space qualification means you're going to be an astronaut doesn't understand all of the different job roles and everything that contributes into it. You see it in the light of day of space qualifications. You see it as this, what you've just talked about. But actually, the structures around it is so many people propping up an industry and skills that need rather like you can be the best coder or developer of a game, but if you can't work to a brief in terms of a design, if you can't work with somebody else, you can't do all this other thing. I often use a wonderful thing in regards to Pixar from a professor at Harvard called Professor Linda Hill, and she talked about the the collective genius rather than what we see genius as an Einstein individual that comes up with something and does it. She talks about actually the collective genius of what happens at Pixar. Nobody knows or knew the CEO of when she did her TEDx talk, but they all knew Einstein and they thought that person's a genius, that person isn't. But it's the orchestrating of a team and a collective high might of a network of genius and innovation that really takes things to the next step. That is multiple intricacies and overlapping circles of people coming together. And also, it's not just process. It's not just if you do this, then this, then this, then this in this row. And I'm like, things happen. Things will start. Like some of the drawings of a Pixar movie, and she used up, might have taken 6 months where some things have accelerated, but nothing is complete until that bit is done. I think that's what we're talking about here in terms of all of that collective, that element, the skills of coming together, but those human intelligence skills on top of the AI that allow people to not just use a particular tool and have a skill set, but be able to orchestrate, implement, explain, and tell a story of it as well.
You're touching on such an important point, which is the human side of a company, the human side of life and work. I was just listening to one of your podcasts, and it was talking about just how scary or how tragic the fear that students have of interacting with each other, with authority figures, with adults. Like we've become such a digital society that we all stare in our phones, and kids growing up staring at social media and playing games. Right, we're trying to take hours that the kids are spent playing games and turn them into creators where they're engaging with each other to make things. And you see the stasis that we have created our children to become, to have. And when you flip it around and say, now they're working on a team and they're super passionate about it, and in order to get the thing that they want to get done, they have to collaborate and talk to each other. Like I often joke that in the working world, you look over someone's shoulder and it's called collaboration. In school, you look over someone's shoulder and it's called cheating. Like, but the world is about collaboration. And so our whole thing is just put youth in a context that they're really, really passionate about, and let them do something that looks like the workforce, that literally is the exact same way that a high functioning software team works. And then do it at scale. And we could talk about how you do that at scale. But it's exactly what you just said, which is, let them work together, because there is no, giant company of one person. Like school should look like the workforce. If it's going to train you like for the workforce, and the workforce is collaborative. So shouldn't school look a little bit more like that collaborative experience of actually building something and taking it to market?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, and a podcast guest that we've got coming up as well. I was just reading his book, Russell Cayley, who many of you will be aware of who listen to this. He's written a new book called The Firefly Effect, and he literally talks about one of the biggest challenge is that this assessment. He calls it the assessment industrial complex. This idea that we've got this whole system built around what matters is what we can measure. I spoke to somebody who I quote quite a lot, and he talks about this idea that what we measure, what matters is what we can measure, and really what we should be thinking about is measuring what really matters. And so it's so much easier to be able to measure recall. It's so much easier to be able to measure rote memorization and whether they can or they can't, pass, fail, black and white. Can they complete this? Can they not complete that? And if it's shades of grey, or there's a subjectivity in that, or there's something that is harder to kind of clarify. So like collaboration is a perfect example from based on what you've just said there. Collaboration is one of those skills, and even creativity. Like, how do you measure that? And therefore, because of that, because we can't then scale that and roll that out in the same way from an education system or an Ofsted or an inspection board or whatever else that looks like, we just go, well, what we'll do is we'll default to the things that are like black and white, that we can say yes, no, met, not met. And that is doing us down, isn't it? And I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's it's funny because it's even more rigid than people often realize. there's a country that we're being pulled in to do a pilot to basically teach AI skills and software development skills and entrepreneurial skills, with the intention of rolling it out to the entire country. And this is from a very senior level, like, go do it. And the here in the UAE where I live, and so the remit is there. Go make it happen. And yet, the moment you plug into a system where there's an IB curriculum, a UK curriculum, a US curriculum, the local MOE, and each one of those has its slots with its courses, with its requirements, suddenly what you're doing is kind of this gymnastics to try to teach these skills in the context of the slot that you're allowed in. And we can do it, and we're doing it, and but it's the sort of thing where, like, the full year program for year 9 students, well, they don't get to have that because they have a rotational curriculum where they have only one term rather than the full year experience. And that's before you even get to what you assess. It's just that the space in the class doesn't even exist because it's filled with other things that are important things, right? All these courses are important. Our only point is that, yeah, this is also important to have these skills because these are the skills that are going to get them employed. And so, the experience of trying to shoehorn this, quite frankly, into a curriculum where the curriculum is very rigid, has been kind of this masterful art of gymnastics. But if you said, what are the things we need to teach in this new world? Well, why can't we put in a course for that? It's like you have to change curriculum at a very, very rigid level. You're going to change IB, that will change very slowly. So anyway, it's been a fascinating experience to see, even where the remit is there, at a senior level, the infrastructure that's supposed to steward our youth getting a good education is actually preventing our youth from getting a good education.
It's really interesting, isn't it, that it's just the tail wagging the dog, that we are constantly just saying, this, you have to do this, and then you'll do this, and then you'll go into this, and then you'll get a job. Like, how many young people are paying crazy money in America and the US for university qualifications and then just not going into finding a job that is up to that level? How many people are doing the same in the UK? I think we've had people on previously, quite a few years ago, when you think about the amount of learners that go to university, or young people that go to university, that either don't get a job that's related at all or just fall out of it, is significant because it's tailored for the world of what it was, not what it is now. And I don't want to bash universities. We celebrate those universities, some great ones out there. But actually, we create iterations of courses based on one linear path of, you do a particular subject. I know America's a little bit different, but in England, you will do physical education, you will do that. It's very, and also you then do all of this research. But 1% of anybody that goes to university will probably become a researcher anyway. It's like saying anybody that does this is going to be an engineer. Like, we talked about all of those multifaceted jobs. We don't, and anybody that does a vocational qualification still to this day is seen as a lesser learner and a lesser individual than those people that are judged academically. Societally, we need to change that because the parents will do that. They'll still go and say, I go to my kids go to a grade outstanding Ofsted school, and mine do this, and based on GCSE results or SAT results. I'm like, great, but let's see where it gets your children in a long period of time. I'm not saying it's not gonna, but I think how many of those learners and young people would pass in despite of the teachers? If you put a traffic cone in front of some of those learners at university, let's be honest, my university delivery, I'm not going to say where, and if any of my lecturers are listening, I apologise, but I probably could have still got the same level of qualification out of it, or majority will have done, because we were self-driven, than if you would have put a video up that's played the slides on their own and a traffic cone at the front rather than a lecturer. I think that would be the case.
I want to put forward a more optimistic view just for a second, because I completely agree that what you've identified is exactly the dilemma. And so then the question is, well, then what? What's the alternative? And I want to put forth a kind of bold statement and then kind of back it up, which is that I think GitHub is the best educational institution in the world. And for those of you who don't know what GitHub is the place where software development takes place. Basically, all the engineers of the world take place build software in this place where code is stored and interacted with and built collaboratively. There are 100 million people building in this place called GitHub, just for some reference. There are 500 million repositories or projects. And that place, when you are trying to get hired in Silicon Valley as an engineer, is way more important. Your contributions there, which you can go and look at all the open source contributions that you've ever made. It has all the sorts of statistics around it, so you can see which projects you contributed to and how much, all sorts of, and you can actually go see the code itself. When you are an engineering hiring manager in Silicon Valley, you don't care what degree someone got. You don't care what university they went to. You don't care what their transcript or GPA was. You look at their GitHub account. And because the GitHub account is proof of it's the evidence. It's like hiring a designer. I don't care if they went to RISD. Show me the portfolio. Portfolio matters more than pedigree. And so when you bring people into an environment that looks like GitHub, or quite literally actually is GitHub, and you can have people learn, GitHub's also an incredible learning environment because you have people working on big projects together. In many cases, they're literally professional projects that need people to contribute to those open source projects that are managed by very competent people who need quality code merged in or quality work product merged in. So the student, the first-time contributor, is learning how to contribute to a real professional product. So it's an incredible learning environment, but it's also an incredible quote-unquote transcript. So this notion of how do you validate someone's capability suddenly gets unlocked when you look at it and you realize that's literally the way hiring managers are hiring people, is going and seeing what they were capable of doing. And when they're capable of doing something hard, you know that they're capable of doing that level of difficulty. So I say this because, I think GitHub's the best school in the world. And I define best as it's free, it's the most scalable, it's educating the most people, and it's actually teaching the real skills, and it has the best portfolio evidence system of how capable someone is. And so when you reconfigure what education is and what an institution of education is, to look, and you say, let's just go say, what should it do? It should teach. It should be available to lots of people. It should, and it should validate or certify or test. You can use that word. You start suddenly discovering that there are solutions on the market that already exist. They just look different than school. And from our perspective, if you can take the power of that and infuse that into school so that a teacher or a principal or a school system can then allow an on-ramp into those communities like that, suddenly school can look like this really powerful thing that startups are already, it literally is the startup ecosystem.
This episode of Edufuturist is powered by Integrated Systems Europe, the must-attend event for educators, technologists, and institutional leaders seeking to shape the future of learning.
From the 3rd to the 6th of February 2026, ISE returns to Barcelona, uniting the brightest minds and the boldest ideas in the edtech industry. Join us and push back beyond the possibilities that are transforming the classroom of tomorrow.
Don't just keep up with the industry, get ahead of it. Check out the video that's coming next to find out more and join us for ISE 2026. We'll be there in Barcelona, and use our special code Edufuturists for free registration at iseeurope.org.
The world of education is changing, and education technology is helping to change it. Different teaching styles, more flexible delivery, and a wider range of resources. All of these mean EdTech is playing a greater role than ever. And that applies to learning taking place in the classroom, the lecture hall, the corporate training center, or delivered online. Integrated Systems Europe is the world-renowned annual tech show for the systems integration and audio-visual industry. At ISE 2026, you will find all the leading EdTech brands in our Education Technology Zone in Halls 1 and 2, in our Connected Classroom Showcase, and across the show floor. Solutions on display include wireless presentation systems, interactive displays, short throw projectors, collaboration tables, VR and AR systems, lecture capture, and integrated lecterns. In fact, ISE 2026 has everything you need to create learning experiences that are engaging, involving, and inclusive. See what you can learn. Come to ISE 2026 and explore the future of EdTech.
So the startup ecosystem is already iterative. It's already basing itself on what you can already do, rather than feeling like, okay, we're going to do a curriculum that in year 7, this is what you're going to have. In grade 9, this is what you're going to do. You go in, oh, well, actually, why am I teaching that to them when they've done it for 10 years? And so it becomes very personalized, and that buzz phrase around personalized learning, which we obviously has been bastardized and become a buzzword, but actually is the dream of everything, of every parent, of every learner, of every teacher, that we could make sure that it makes a difference to that individual, rather than let's just teach them just in time learning, or just in case learning, rather than just in time stuff, which is where we are. So you've developed Endless Studios as a vehicle for this. Would you just maybe talk to us, because obviously you're based out in the UAE. That accent isn't native to UAE, I'm guessing. So maybe talk to us a little bit of the journey of how you got to that, and what you're currently doing to kind of address, because some of these, this is the really cool, and I think a lot of people who are listening to this are going, yes, yes, yes. Okay, but how is this actually working?
Yeah. Yes. So I'll give a quick story. But I went to China for a year when I was 11 years old. I lived with a Chinese family. I then spent a summer in an orphanage working to basically volunteer when I was 16 years old. And then that led me to start a foundation, which I did for about 10 years, working with orphans in various ways, literally with dying children. And it just changed my life. Like impact suddenly becomes really important when you literally are holding the child whose life you're saving. Um, and yet the impact of individual kids, I knew that I needed to have an impact at scale. And so a long kind of journey through trying to find what it was. I went to Silicon Valley, went to Stanford Business School, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and this notion that, wow, smartphones are about to sweep across emerging markets, computers are not, and computers are still important. You're not going to have a job in this modern economy if you don't have a computer, which means that you're not going to be able to study to learn how to have a job in that world if you don't have a computer. So how do we solve that? Long story short, we have this kind of operating system with pay-as-you-go laptops, and then we have this that allows financing for the next couple billion people, and you can fill it with content so you can have internet or not have internet. All sorts of really, really cool stuff that you can do when you design technology for the specific context of people in emerging markets. But now, okay, we go to this question then of, well, then how do you teach them the skills? And we had this core insight: games can teach. And that in and of itself had this long journey of learning and understanding, what does it even mean for games to be able to teach? We started thinking, let's go build a game where you could hack everything. And then we realized there were so many things about it. But long story short, if you go back to the beginning of the insight, it's not the playing of the game that teaches you, it's the making of the game that teaches you. If you can build a game, you can build a piece of software. But when you look at the journey of like a novice all the way to a professional, or a young kid all the way to an adult, there's a long journey and there's a long skill curve of quite literally a childhood, an entire youth of building those skills. And that journey can really be broken down into 5 phases. And so if you look at what we do, and I want to talk about our org chart in a second because it explains a little bit of how the messiness of what we do. But if you look at the core thing of what we do, there are really 5 phases. The beginning of a kid's journey is just excitement, exploring, discovery, play, making them want it. And so something like Minecraft is exactly that. How do you get kids to really want it? And so what we've done is we've built a tool that is like a Minecraft. But if you play Minecraft, any kid, 6-year-old can do it. And then there's this leap to like Unity, which is like a professional game engine that most of the world's mobile games are built on. And no one knows how to use. And so we realized that there was this giant gap from one to the other, and we had to fill that gap. So we built a tool that was as simple as Minecraft to be able to place blocks, but it systematically scaffolded you and built your skills so that one day you literally could go into Unity because it is built on top of Unity. So I often describe our goal is to get you off of our tool as quickly as possible, because our goal is to teach you how to use the professional tools. We just had to build a really good tool to be able to do that. And it's a very, very cool tool, very powerful. You can go download it on endlessstudios.com if you like, and you'll find it there. It's called NStar. And that, by the way, was just born as a quick kind of a history. We encountered a company that built Minecraft EDU. They also built a product called GameStar Mechanic, which taught you how to build games in a very systemized way back in a 2D environment. This is really the 3D evolution of basically what they learned from GameStar Mechanic and Minecraft fused into an experience that brings you into Unity. So that's kind of one piece. But a journey to a professional is not about one tool. Once you are there, then you have phase two, which is you have to be handhelds. Once you want to learn, you actually want someone to guide you, to teach you how to do the things that you need to do in order to do the things you want to do. We often use the terminology that you used a moment ago, which is just-in-time learning rather than just-in-case learning. And so for that, we have programs that we run. We have a series of programs that guide you. If you have a GPU, you can run it on this tool, NStar. If you don't have a GPU, we have two different teams. One is a company called Endless Studios. The other one is a foundation called the Endless Foundation. And that is focused it has a tech team that is also building stuff on top of Godot, so that even if you have a really, really, really low-end computer, you can still have an incredible experience that also walks you through that kind of handheld type program. The core of it, though, the real magic happens once you've gotten someone out of a place where they need to be handheld and into a community where they have enough skills to float and swim and play in that community, building with others. And so the core of what we're trying to build, which has not yet fully manifested yet, because we're building all the preconditions, including the actual technology for that space and the pathway to bring lots of students in, but is a community where you have, ultimately, you can have millions of people, tens of millions of people. The more people in the community, the better. And the challenge with education today is that almost everything in the world that is successful online is a network effect. The definition of a network effect is that the more people are in it, the better it gets. The more people are in Uber, the better it gets, because you get more drivers, you get more passengers. The more people in Amazon, the better. The more sellers, the more buyers, and vice versa. Now, obviously, social media is a very much network effect. Education is the anti-network effect. In other words, you take a 20-person classroom and you make it 80, and it's like you don't want to send your kids to that school. Literally, that was our case for our 4-year-old entering school. We didn't want to send them to an 80-person class, so we didn't send them to a school we really love. And so how do you make education a network effect? Well, that's where the GitHub model comes in. GitHub, a community of creators where there are piles of projects. It's like the more projects there are, the better. The more fellow, travelers who share your passion, who you can go and befriend and collaborate with, the better. And so, and the more of that there is, the more other professionals may want to come and hire from that community pool. And so the core of what we're trying to do is kind of create this place where professionals want to build games with these student talent, and the students want to come work on real games that they're passionate about and learn in the process. And so that kind of smorgasbord or interface between the supply of talent, the students, and the demand for talent, studios wanting to work with those students to build games that that they don't have the resources to build, but the students can help them build. That's the core of what we're trying to build at Endless Studios. That's the holy grail. That's the dream. And so what that unlocks, that last studio piece, is kind of up that curve on phase 5, is the ability to literally intern at scale with professional studios working on professional games at full professional level. And that is a journey that a high school student can go through, a college student can go through. That can happen quickly, that can happen in a short period of time, a long period of time. That can happen plugged into classrooms where teachers use the tool and use the curriculum we've created to guide students into the community. So we have a couple of organizations that we run. We also donate to organizations. We invest in organizations. Our goal is to achieve the mission. We're in the very, very blessed circumstance where we can support anyone who can help us achieve that goal. We're working with universities to attach a university degree around this. We're working with Scratch to create an on-ramp into this. kind of, the more people with Games for Change, Global Game Jam, the more people we can rally around a larger vision, then the more of a network effect you get across all of it, so that one day anyone anywhere can learn these skills regardless of their circumstances. That was a long answer, sorry.
No, it was a long answer, but it's what's really interesting is where you are now, and a lot of people say will see the success potentially of what you're having, rather than actually the journey you've been on and the iterations and the team it's taken. I know you talked about an org chart and all those kind of things. What I'm interested in is how has it developed from thought to where you are now, and are we allowed to ask what then? There's so many different things that are developing and coming on. I'm guessing when you first started out, unless you then said, I'm a visionary, all of these ducks are in a row, these are all of the steps, and this is exactly, it might have been if they're just doing one thing. And I think people see the achievement as the intention, where actually you probably intended to do something very, very different, or a smaller version of it, and it is really ballooned into the development of all of the ecosystem and everything that drives it, rather than just getting kids into gaming and learning those skills.
Yeah, we have had one goal from the very beginning, and it has not changed, and that is the whole world empowered. And when we say the whole world, we do not mean people who happen to have an internet connection and a computer and everyone else is excluded from it. We mean everyone. And as we chased that vision, what we discovered was that there were more and more parts of it that were necessary to achieve that vision. And I quite literally mean this is like a religious mission, this is not something that I can give up on. And so, at each stage, as we've encountered barriers, we've had to shut things down. We've been through, a whole journey, and that's part of what the book is about. It's about the journey, but also then what the lessons have been. And many of the greatest insights that we've had along that way have been the opposite of our initial hypothesis. Many of those insights were things that we did not want to do, we did not intend on doing, but that we realized we had to do. And when you take this, really, it's a simple curve. I draw this kind of S curve from novice all the way up to professional. And when you look at what it takes to support every step of that, so that it's really, really seamless, it turns out there are a few steps. Again, there are 5 steps, and each one of those steps needs things to support the specific place that someone is on that journey. And each of those 5 steps is tough, and doing them all at once is very tough. So we are by no means, looking back on success. We are in the middle of the fight to make it happen. But we are fighting to make it happen because it's so clear to us the whole world needs to be empowered, and the stakes of it are higher than ever, because a world in which 3 billion people, at the base of the 3 billion youth, 25 years old and under, don't have the skills to have jobs is a world of revolution and war. And a world in which all of those kids are educated is a world of, the hope for prosperity and universal hope. I'll just use very quickly a kind of a metaphor that people often talk about. It is the printing press. And what people don't realize about the printing press is that when the printing press came along, the world, the average person's life really did not change at all for hundreds of years. They were on farms when the printing press came along, and hundreds of years later, they were still on farms. And if you look at literacy rates over the years, it was very, very flat for almost the entire planet. And then there was one country, the UK, that invested in literacy so that it could rule its empire. It hit 65% literacy, and then the Industrial Revolution happened. And it was the Industrial Revolution that changed the way all of us live. And the Industrial Revolution took thousands, if not tens of thousands, of micro innovations, including factory managers and postmasters and train masters and all of those people who needed literacy. So it wasn't the printing press that changed the world. It was printing press plus literacy that changed the world. And when we look at the tools we have today, whether it's software, the computer, or AI is the latest and most powerful version that unlocks, by the way, a lot more people to have literacy and fluency in this amazing tool sitting in front of us, that when you democratize access to that, so that let's call it 65% also hit that same threshold, it's all of a sudden the innovations you're going to see in medicine, in construction, everything under the sun is going to be extraordinary, But the literacy that we have today in that tool, in other words, the ability to fluently create with that tool, whether you're a product manager, project manager, the 3D modeler, the coder, the ability to do that literacy is lower today than actual literacy in the dark ages. And so the stakes are high in teaching these kids this stuff. And so,
and they are high. They really are. And we're hearing this, that it's not just about can a young person do Python? Does a
yes,
young person understand PHP?
completely.
That's not what we're talking about.
I completely agree.
It's like we're asking the wrong question. We're saying,
yes,
we've opened up. Right, we've got the internet. Great. We've got AI. We've got mobile phones. But then, that is happening absolutely all around the world now, where there's two sides of an argument that are saying, let's ban mobile phones, and then others that are saying, let's embrace this. Nobody's actually going, let's let kids loose with it by intentionally, but it is happening by default. So we're in a position where we've got technology, printing press, we've got versus AI, versus gaming, versus coding, whatever else. And then there is the ability and the need to, how do we get this into the hands of more people in an effective and scalable way, which is obviously what you're trying to do. And I think I imagine the name of the business is intentional. It's not like, we're not saying like, okay, right, we've arrived. We talk on the podcast quite a lot about James Carsey's stuff, and I know Steve was talking about this recently about infinite games, and we're playing an infinite game here. We're not playing they've completed school. So yeah, so we're loving this, and there's probably loads that we could get into, and we could. I think there's lots that will resonate with a lot of our time, with a lot of our listeners on not just teaching games. It was a little bit like this, by the way, when we introduced esports in lots of schools and colleges. They're like, we can't teach just kids to play games. We're not. We're looking at but what you're doing here is another layer above it. So love it. So we always finish podcasts with a set of quick fire questions. You may well have listened to a recent one and realized what they are, because you said that you listened to some. So you may be prepped or you may not be. And if you're not prepped, that's cool as well. So there's three. I'll ask the first and the third one. Steve will ask the second one in between. Just a quick fire response, what your thoughts are. So I'll go first. So the first one is, and I love this one. If schools were judged like restaurants by how much customers actually enjoyed the experience, what would change overnight?
I mean, they'd be empty. Who would go? Overnight, no one would go.
Let's leave it there. That is strong enough as a quick fire. Absolutely love that. Okay. What's the most dangerous myth that educators tell themselves to avoid real change?
The educators that we work with see the problems, want a solution. You have this podcast because they understand the problems, and the people who speak on this podcast, the problems are clear, and they're overwhelmed, and they work so hard. My mother is very involved in inner city education in the state of Connecticut in the U.S., where we're from. And in that state, 30% of the kids are disengaged or disconnected, which means they literally don't show up to school, or are at risk of not showing up to school. And the challenge of being a teacher in that environment is so hard. One of the most important chapters that I wrote in this book that I'm publishing is about the importance of teachers in someone's life. And so I think that what we see from teachers is so many wanting an answer, having 100 tech startups showing up trying to sell them a product, trying to juggle all of these platforms, and that don't even talk to each other, and they in many cases create more workload than they solve. And so I don't even know if I remember the question, but what I feel is the pain point of the teachers that have to live with a very, very within the same structures and challenges that we were just talking about a moment ago, with assessments and curriculum and all of that, who have hopes for their kids, and work so hard. And what we're trying to do is to enable and empower all the teachers in the world and all the kids who don't have teachers, both. And by building something that means that someone who doesn't have a teacher still has a path forward, it actually ironically makes it easier for the teacher, because the system can do so much so that the teacher doesn't have to learn something totally new. They can, they can be the mentor rather than have to do the heavy lifting. That's a much longer answer than I know these last questions are for, but that's what comes to mind when I.
And interestingly, the last one, you kind of touched on this, but it'd be interesting to hear where you go. If a 10-year-old asked you why they have to go to school, what would you actually say?
I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 7-month-old, so I'll have to answer that question soon. There are really important skills that you have to learn, and you learn them in school. And some of those are as simple as like trigonometry, I mean, like, knowing basic math matters. I mean, maybe we should focus more on statistics rather than trigonometry. You could tweak things around the edges, but there are basic things you need to learn. There's also the ability to like sit down and focus. The marshmallow test, which many people quote, is a very young kid, 5-year-old kid, how long they can withstand having a second, their marshmallows in order to be able to get a second marshmallow, is a huge determinant of their success in life. It's basically someone's ability to sit and focus and have discipline is so important. The ability to collaborate and have these human relationships with your peers, with teachers, is so important. Things like physical education are so important and have been undervalued, I believe, recently. So that to create a whole human, I believe you need an institution that is designed to create a whole human. It's just this little sliver of skills that are so important, but that have not been systematically infused into that system. That's missing. But I think that's what a 10-year-old needs. And my wish would be, what if you could make that restaurant one that every kid wanted? What if it felt a little more like Disney? And what if in the process of feeling like Disney, they were learning, how to get jobs at Pixar?
What a wonderful way to end a wonderful conversation. I think it is intertwined with some real nuggets. So if you are seeing this or reading about this, watch the whole episode, because I think throughout it's littered with nuggets and some great examples of things that we can do, but also the call to and the call out to educators are to see it, want it. We just need to change the system to allow it. It's been a wonderful conversation, Matt. I've really enjoyed it. I think we've stepped into lots of different things. All of the links to the detail around Matt, Endless, and everything else will be in the show notes. If you haven't got your tickets, why not, for the Uprising 2026 on June the 25th, 2026. The link will be in the show notes. Go get your ticket. And we will see you all very, very soon. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Shaping the next generation.